think I'm on the wonk. Hang on a minute. Let me try and sort that out. There we go. Okay. Hopefully I'm live. I'm just going to check and see. Let's have a look. Okay. Right. I don't know what my iPad is doing. Bear with me. Okay, let's have another look. That's better. Now I can see myself. I don't know what my iPad is doing. That looks better. Okay, let's have another look. That's better. Excellent. Okay. So it looks like there's a few people there. Can't see who you are yet, but I'm sure all will be revealed. Turn down the volume. There we go. Oh, I won't go into the full intricacies of doing a Facebook Live, but let's just say I've got 3 different bits of electrical equipment here plugged in. So I need 3 different cables plus the microphone. I need the volume and the camera on one and not on the other. And I need to fiddle around with lights, and I also need to make sure that I'm not going to either trip over or strangle myself with all the electric leads. So it's always quite an adventure starting off one of these. I try so hard to get here bang on the dot of 2 o'clock, but there's always something that I realise I've forgotten. And if you've ever played Hunt the Charger in your house, then that's what I was doing today. Okay, so Sandy's here. Hello, Sandy. Belinda's here. They both say hi to everyone. Maureen's here. Hello, Maureen. Lovely to have you. And Mary too. So that's pretty good, isn't it, for a Friday afternoon? I've had a few people ask me in the week how to find me here. So I'm always happy to help with that. So we may have a few people who are kind of catching up. I know Facebook can hide things sometimes, can't it? Strictly speaking, you should be able to always find these live videos either at the top of my business page, which as you know is called Handmade at Home with Sally Bowman, and also if you see the event, I do like an event page each week for the live and tell you what I'm going to be doing and what you might need if you want to craft along and so on. And I link the two, so you should be able to watch me live either on the event page or on my actual business page, but that still doesn't mean it's always easy to find. So let's have a look. Oh, Marjorie's here. Lovely. Hi, Marjorie. She says hello to everybody. Let's see. Maureen said hi. Hello. Mary said hi. Brilliant. Okay. So it's Friday again. I don't know where this week has gone. For all there's all these things that we're not allowed to do. My week still seems very full and very busy. And I couldn't quite believe it yesterday when I realised that the next day was going to be Friday. Nearly a whole week of March gone as well, which is really nice. I don't know about your gardens, but mine suddenly spring has really sprung in the garden. I'm feeling a whole lot more cheerful about all sorts of things now we've had some sunshine, which has been really lovely. The daffodils are nearly all out, the snowdrops are over, we've got tulips a couple of inches up from the ground, which is really nice. So yeah, things are really improving out there. I'm sure we've got some more cold and grey and wet weather to come, but at the moment it's very spring-like, so I hope it's nice wherever you are. I know Sandy's in Lincolnshire. I know a few of you others are local, not sure about everybody, so let me know what it's like where you are. Let me know what you've been doing this week. Have you made anything in particular? Have you done anything exciting? So what's my week been? My week has been boxes of card and cutting card mostly. I had the excitement of a trip to the post office today. I took some card kits to send out to people for classes. And I've had piles of card. If you could see the whole of my craft room, it would be an absolute nightmare at the moment. I've got stacks like this of card all over the place for different classes because I'd ordered lots of things and then they all came at once. So I'm trying to keep things in piles and cut and send things out as fast as I can. I actually love to cut card. I sit down with my list of measurements and either a podcast on or maybe some YouTube that I'm kind of listening to rather than watching and cut card away, and I can pass hours like that quite happily. I think I've got card cutter's shoulder at the moment. Actually, it's yes, I've done too much with one arm, but that's been my week really. Sandy says Lincolnshire is dry but overcast. Okay, well, dry is good at least at the moment. So that's something. Gillian's here. Hello, Gillian. Lovely to see you. Okay, so what's new in the Stampin' Up world? Let me think. Not very much is new from last week. We're still thoroughly enjoying the Butterfly Brilliance stamps and dies and beautiful papers. I showed you those last week, so if you didn't see last week's video, you can just either scroll back up or go to the videos and you'll see the video there, or even go to my YouTube channel, which has got the same name, Handmade with Sally Bowman. Sorry, Handmade at Home with Sally Bowman, and you'll see last week's live video there too. Where I showed you the bundle and made some cards and really enjoyed them. The stamps were out of stock, but they are back in stock now, so if you've had one on order, it should be getting sent out to you very soon. If you haven't ordered them yet, they're beautiful, so they are still available. Remember that the two different packs of paper, there's a wood grain paper and then there's the patterned paper with some of the designs that the die will actually cut out as well. Those are only available until May the 3rd, so if you really love those, order them sooner rather than later. As we get nearer the time, they will be while stocks last, so don't delay ordering those, because otherwise you'll be really sad. The stamps and dies are going to be in the new annual catalogue, which launches in May, so you'll be able to get those for absolutely ages, but not the papers. Something else I was just going to say to you is about colours that retire. So those of you who know Stampin' Up know that every year we get 5 new colours of ink and card and ribbons and bits and pieces, and we have those for 2 years only, and they tend to be colours that are in fashion at the time for home decor, for clothes and so on and so forth. I've no idea how they decide what those colours are, but they just kind of appear, and I usually look at them and think, oh, new colours, lovely, and then I find myself seeing, I don't know, in adverts on television or in catalogues and things like that, suddenly these colours, and they're everywhere. So they always pick absolutely the right colours, but we only have them for 2 years. And when we get towards the end of an annual catalogue, so it's almost time for the new annual catalogue, which is where we soon are going to be, what happens is everybody suddenly thinks, oh my goodness, I never got the card in that colour, or I never got an ink refill in that colour, and very often they run out at the warehouse and you can't get them anymore. So our catalogue retiring list, so that's all the things that are going to retire, will come out next month in April. So this month, absolutely everything in the catalogue is available. Next month, the retiring in colours, and I'll tell you which ones those are in just a second, anything in those colours will only be available while stocks last. So if you know that you love a particular colour that's going to be disappearing, don't wait till April to order ribbon or card or an ink pad or ink refill in that colour, or you will be really disappointed. The colours that are going to retire are Purple Posy, which we have in card and ribbon and things. We don't have ink for that. Terracotta Tile, Seaside Spray, Pretty Peacock and Rococo Rose. So those 5 colours are all going to be going. If you've got a catalogue, you will be able to see everything that's available in those colours. If you don't have a catalogue and don't have a demonstrator who looks after you, let me know and I can send you one out. So my top tip for this week is look at those colours. Is there anything you need? And if there is, get your order in as soon as possible. At the moment, I can't order Rococo Rose ink refills, although everything else was available when I checked. But if you know you want one, let me know and I'll put you on the list and then I can order it for you as soon as it's available. So that's my top tip for this week. Okay. Belinda's saying she ordered a stack of the butterfly paper last night. I can't say I blame you, Belinda. It's very easy to use, very easy indeed to use. It's really beautiful paper. I've got a couple of customers who've ordered stacks as well. don't blame them. Okay, so what's coming up today? Well, I'm going to do a very quick run through of 2 of the adhesive sheets that we have and show you just how useful they are. We've got adhesive sheets and foam adhesive sheets, and I don't think they get as much love as they should. They're so useful. So I'm going to quickly show you how they work and the kinds of things that you can use them for. And then most of the session I'm going to be doing some vintage style card making with you. I've got a string of very simple techniques and you can use them all or pick 1 or 2 to make really vintage style cards or slightly vintage style cards. And I've got a version to show you just to prove that it doesn't all have to be brown. So that's what's coming up. If you've got questions, please ask them as we go. I'm always very happy to answer questions. And I'm really grateful if you can like and share this video, because that way other people who might enjoy it will get to see it. And you know what Facebook's like. It shows things to all sorts of people when you share something. So that would be really great. So if you can hit that share button, big thank you. I'm going to cover you over now, turn everything round so you can see my desk, and we'll get started with some crafting. So I'll cover you over just so you don't get seasick while I change the angle on my camera. Okay. And I'd forgotten, despite running around looking for a charger, I'd completely forgotten to turn it on the main, so I plugged my phone in, but I hadn't switch that switch on the mains, which is something I'm always forgetting to do, and then I wonder why it's showing me low power mode. Okay, so I've moved the camera stand. Now I've just got to change the settings on the camera and get things round the right way. If you watched the end last week, you'll see I forgot to take them off last week, so I ended up upside down for a very short time, which is always fun. Okay, now I may have to tweak this a little bit more, but I will do my best to get it right quickly for you. Okay, so that's the big reveal. Let me take that cable out of the way. And then once it pops up on my iPad, I can see what you can see, and then I can get things in the right place. Okay, let's move my light a little bit. I'm still moving a cable. Okay, so you've got the end of my grid paper here. That's probably more or less right. I think I might leave well alone with that. All right, so foam, adhesive sheet and adhesive sheet. I'm going to deal with adhesive sheet first. So let me bring in a card and show you the kind of thing that I like to use adhesive sheets for, and then I'll show you what they look like. So here is a card. Oops, got a remnant of paper in there. I've used actually some of the butterfly paper here, this lovely watercolour wash. Let me pull that down a bit. There we are. So this is a die cut from the absolutely gorgeous Brilliant Wings dies that I've just been talking about. Now you can see that gluing this onto a piece of card is not the easiest of things. I mean, look how fine those antennae are. They're, I don't know, a millimetre wide maybe. And you've got all this lacy detail on here. And whilst you can put glue on these more solid areas, there's an awful lot of this image that you can't catch down with glue. And this is exactly the kind of thing that I like to use adhesive sheets for. So this is what they look like when they come. They measure, oh, let's have a look. Does it tell me? Then I don't have to measure. Yes, it does. So they're 6 inches by 12 inches. So half a sheet of 12 by 12, or you would get 2 6 by 6 sheets of designer series paper across there, and obviously you can fit it to your card as well. So let me show you how it works. You get 12 of these sheets in a pack, and it's essentially a sheet of double-sided adhesive. It's got backing paper on both sides. And on one side, I don't know if you can see, it's split. The backing sheet is split just to enable you to peel off the backing. And if I lift that up, I don't know if you can see at the edge, it kind of strings as you pull it back so you can sort of see the adhesive on there. So all this is sticky, all of this. So if I want to die cut something like that, I get my piece of card. Got some black card here, some basic black card, and I peel back the adhesive on the sheet just to expose as much as I need. Now you don't have to do a large piece, you can cut a tiny little piece if you like. So I just peel back the backing paper, and then I just attach my card to the adhesive. Like that. And then I can just slide these back. And then what I tend to do is I will then trim this off You can trim the sheet first if you know exactly what size you want before you start sticking it to the card. And it cuts without making everything really sticky if you do that, because you've got the backing paper top and bottom. But I mostly use a smaller piece of card, so I just peel back the backing paper and stick my card onto it. Now this bit here has still got adhesive on it, so I just rub my finger and just take that bit off. I could trim it off with scissors, but I often don't bother and just rub that adhesive off, just so it's not going to stick onto my dies or my die cutting machine. And then I would run this through my die cutting machine in the normal way. It's not the die I want, this is the die I want. So for the swallowtail, for instance, I'd pop that in my machine, I'd put the die on top, and I would run it through and cut. I'm not going to cut in front of you now, simply because my machine doesn't fit well under here. You can't see very much of it, so it doesn't add an awful lot to it. But I would run that through, and then I would end up with my die cut piece like this. So this is essentially a sticker now. So if I peel off the backing, which is the other side of the adhesive sheet backing, you can see that that is now a sticker. So that has got adhesive over the whole of the back of it. So if I want to complete a card, it's very, very easy now. So I've got another note card here. I've added a layer of the butterfly bijou paper and a layer of black card. And now I'm just going to take the backing paper off my butterfly. And even those little tiny antennae are sticky. And I can now just stick that onto my project. No messing around with glue. The whole thing just sticks down beautifully. You can see I turn it upside down. The whole thing is really, really well attached. And pretty it up with a few rhinestones. I do love a rhinestone. And then my card is done. So that's what I really love to use the adhesive sheets for. Particularly, I mean, they're good for any kind of die cut. You can use them on solid shapes or anything. But if you've got something which has got a lot of fine lines, maybe you've got letters, maybe you've got something like these butterflies or any of the other dies we have with a lot of fine detail on them, then it's absolutely brilliant to be able to put adhesive sheet on the back of your card and then cut it. Makes life so much easier. So if you haven't got adhesive sheets in your stash, I strongly recommend them because they really are absolutely brilliant. So there we go. There are our two cards there with the butterfly. So that is adhesive sheets. I'm just going to put away my die here. And then I will show you the foam adhesive sheets, which are a little bit different. And if you're wondering, the adhesives are all in the annual catalogue, which looks like this. I just moved right away from my microphone, you probably couldn't hear me. So they're all in the annual catalogue, and they are on page 162. Here we are. Oh, excuse me. So adhesive sheets are here. They're the first ones I showed you, and the ones I'm just about to show you are almost at the end here. So number 1 and number 12 on that page, 162. So let's move those out of the way. These big sheets do go a long way. You know, I've still got that whole section left from one sheet, so I've made 2 cards and I've got enough on here to make at least another 2 of these large butterflies, and then that piece left, and then that's only 1 sheet I've used, so it goes quite a long way. Alright, so let's move all of that. And then the next thing I'm going to show you are the foam adhesive sheets. So these are smaller. These measure, does it tell us? Yeah, 4 9/16 by 4 3/8. So near enough 4.5 by 4 yeah, just over 4.5 and just up by just under 4.5 inches. So if you think 4.5 inches square, you won't go far wrong. So these likewise have got backing paper on the front and the back, but what they've got in between is foam adhesive. So if you're familiar with our foam adhesive pads, dimensionals, this is the same stuff but in a sheet. So you can get them cut into little foam pads like that. But what I'm talking about is a sheet that you can cut yourself. Now you can of course cut this into squares or strips or whatever you need. But I like to die cut it as well. So here, for instance, is a card I've made using the foam adhesive sheets, and I've used them behind these letters here. So I don't know, let me see if you can see that on the camera. So they're really 3D'd, and I'm going to show you how I do that. Hi Liz, Liz has joined us. Very nice to have you, Liz. Okay, Belinda's saying that she likes to use the adhesive sheets, that's the ones I've just shown you, for techniques like the scrappy strips technique, putting it on the back of the patterned paper, and it's especially good when you're mounting the strips on foil and don't want to get glue everywhere like she does. Yeah, you and me both, Belinda. I get glue everywhere as well when I do things like that. And you can get it off foil, but it's an awful fiddle. So yeah, the foam adhesive sheets are absolutely great. So let me show you how I would use, the adhesive sheets for that. This is the foam adhesive, and I'll show you how I use that as well, and then you can see how to make your own three-dimensional shapes. Alright, so again I peel back the backing paper, and I could do a whole piece of card, but what I've actually done is I've brought in a strip of this glimmer paper. Look how sparkly and lovely that is, which is just the right size for the dies I'm going to use. So I'm just going to stick this on the sheet a bit like I did before, and then I'm just going to snip that to size, and then I'm only trying to use a piece that's the correct size for what I want. So again, you can see that this, you know, this goes a long way. That bit can go back in my pack for next time. You get how many sheets? You get 6 sheets in a pack, so plenty in there to play with. So that's my foam adhesive sheet on the back of my glimmer paper, and I then get out my dies. In this case I used letter dies. So this is the Playful Alphabet dies, which I absolutely love. They're a really good size for just normal sized cards. They're not too big, and there's a huge variety in here, and they have doubled up on a few of them. Like some of the vowels, you've got more than one die, so you can do all your cutting together. So let's just take the B for birthday. So I would lay all my dies out on here, for instance. There we go. Let's just do 2 or 3 of them just to show you. And as before, I'm not going to bring my big shot under here because I haven't really got space under my camera, but I would just run this through my big shot as usual, like that, and then like magic it would cut out the letters for me. And then all I need to do is to peel off the backing from the back of the letters and stick them down. Absolutely fabulous. And then I've got letters or anything else that I want with 3D foam on the back in the shape of that, rather than having to add loads and loads of dimensionals. And particularly for something like letters or any other die cut shape that's got narrow pieces in it, it really is so much easier to use the sheet and cut it precisely to size than it is to be cutting up dimensionals into little pieces and adding them on the back, or even using the tiny dimensionals. That just doesn't work for this because these areas of the letters are even narrower. So that's the foam adhesive sheet. Fabulous stuff. I don't use it on every project, but oh my goodness, when I need it, it's absolutely perfect. So let me know if you've got any questions on that. I'm going to put things away a little bit so we've got some space, and then I'm going to get grungy with vintage style. I'll leave that card there for you to look at while I move a few things out of the way. There we go, lots of rummaging off camera. All right. So let me show you the kind of thing I mean when I talk about vintage. So this is kind of it's tradition, vintage, I suppose, maybe with a bit of a modern twist. So I'll go on to something that's not very brown in a minute, but I thought I would start off with something that's perhaps a little bit of what you would expect when you think about a vintage style card. It's got some distressing on here. I've torn pieces. There's lots of inking, there's a bit of spattering, and I've used kind of grungy colours on here. Although I have used quite a modern kind of image on here. And then let me show you one which doesn't have all the brown on it. So there's another one. So that's a vintage style card, but very different. I've used pinks on this. We've got some really quite light areas here in the centre. I've used exactly the same techniques, but I haven't used the kind of the dark grungy colours. I'm just going to have a slurp of my tea while you look at those. Otherwise it'll be as usual. I shall suddenly remember it and my tea will have all gone cold. Thank you, Liz. Liz says, wow. I do love vintage style. Every time I make one like this, I wonder why I don't do it more often. But honestly, if you could have seen my fingers at the end of this, well, you will. You'll see my fingers in a minute because I'm actually going to make one and show you. Oh, that's a nice cup of tea. I hope you've got a cup of tea or something nice sitting next to you on your desk. Okay, so I'm going to make a card more like this one, but I will bring the pink one back afterwards and you'll be able to see the techniques used exactly the same, just with different colours. So let me move that out of the way. Liz said she's just got Beautiful Moments, so you'll need to try it out. It's a lovely stamp set, Liz, isn't it? It's fairly new to me and I do absolutely love it. It's just so beautiful. So yes, you must try it out. It works with all kinds of things. It works with clean and simple and just simple stamping. And I think it really works as well with a more vintage look. All right, so what do you need to do a bit of a vintage thing? Well, first of all, you need to think colours. Now, muted tones. So I've obviously got muted browns on here, but again, if you look at this one, I've just got muted pinks, and I've picked pinks which are perhaps more on the brown side. I used Rococo Rose, Blushing Bride on this mostly, and I did use Merry Merlot to stamp this, but everything else is Rococo Rose, which is quite a brownish pink, and Blushing Bride, which is paler but is also a brownish pink. And on this one I've used Crumb Cake and Soft Suede for the most of the grunging, and I've done my stamping in Early Espresso. So muted tones again, browns, and you pick 2 or 3 shades of the same colour and that will work really well for you. In terms of your card colour, in this case I've used Crumb Cake, but you can use all kinds of different colours for your base. You can certainly use a pale colour to start with. On this one I used Very Vanilla. So this area here has got just a hint of pink ink. The rest of it I have inked, so it doesn't really look like vanilla card, but it is. So you can start off with basic white or Very Vanilla card and just add ink to it and that will be absolutely fine. Lorraine loves the pink one and so does Belinda. Thank you very much, ladies. And Faye's here. Hi Faye, lovely to have you. I'm very well indeed, thank you. Hopefully you are too. So that's inks and card. And then in terms of stamps, well, you want some kind of focal image. You can see from this, you can use anything. You know, I've used a dragonfly, I've used this lady walking in the lavender field. You can use almost anything. You might have some images that look specifically vintage. You know, sometimes there are transport images that look quite vintagey, hot air balloons, that kind of thing. But it doesn't have to be a vintage style image. You can actually use a modern image. On this card, I've used a variety of stamps. The dragonfly, I'm sure you recognise, is from Dragonfly Garden. That one there. And then I looked through my other stamp sets and I looked for some that would give me texture or grungy images. So I picked out these 2. So Beauty Abounds, which is a really pretty set with butterflies and flowers and all the rest of it, has got this lovely kind of shaded dotty image in it. So I've picked that one out. And then Comfort and Hope, I've used this one, but this one is also a really nice image for vintage. And actually this one as well, particularly if you just pick a section of it, rather than you stamping the circle every time, you can just stamp the edge of it and that will work really nicely too. So those are the stamps I've got for this particular card. And then there are a whole variety of different techniques which I'm going to work through to show you. So let me pull out my stamps. And then I've got a few other bits and pieces here which we'll work through as we get to them. So the first thing I'm going to do is to stamp my focal image. So I've got some Crumb Cake card here. I'm going to open up my Early Espresso ink pad and just stamp as normal my Dragonfly in the middle there. So there's that. And then the first thing I usually do is just add some ink over and around it, and I tend to work from light to dark. So I've stamped in the darkest, but after that I will work with the other two shades mostly. So Crumb Cake is the lightest one, so I'm going to start off with that. I've got my blending brush here, but you could also use a wedge of sponge. You could use a sponge dauber, whatever you like to use to apply ink to your card. So I'm going to use the blending brushes just because I absolutely love them. So I'll get some ink on there. Just work it a little bit on my paper just to make sure there's no blobs, and then I move my hand in the air and then just hit the card. And I'm just going to work all the way around and more or less avoid the dragonfly. Now I don't know, I'm just looking on my iPad, I think you can see that. There's just a hint of colour there. So it's quite subtle to start with. The thing with inking is you can always add some more ink. But once it's down, it's down. So I always start off with not too much, and we'll see where we end up after that. Then I can always add some more. So I'm just turning the card, I'm keeping my brush going and just blending that ink. It's the same colour as the card, and that's a really good tip just to remember. Whatever card you're using, if you've got an ink in the same colour, that will always give you quite a subtle effect. So that's a good one to start with. And I'm hoping it shows that I've added ink but left a circle more or less around the dragonfly. So now I've got a little bit of light and dark on there. I'm going to bring in just a little bit more darkness towards the edges, and then I'll bring in some grungy stamping, but I'm going to do a bit more inking first. So this is soft suede ink pad. I'm not going to use quite as much ink because it's a darker colour. And I'm going to go over some of that Crumb Cake ink I brushed on, but not all of it. So I will end up with no ink, Crumb Cake, and then soft suede over the top of Crumb Cake around the edge. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, so I've gone all the way around. I will almost certainly come back with some more ink, but I'm going to do a little bit of stamping first and get some texture on there. So I've got my texture stamps here, and if I bring back the finished card, if you know what you're looking for, so I've got this grid one, which I've used here, and I've used around the bottom and up this side as well. So I don't use the whole stamp absolutely everywhere. I kind of put it in patches, and again, you can't really do this right or wrong. It's absolutely fine, and it wouldn't really matter which colour I used, but I'm bearing in mind that the darker the colour, the more impact it has, so I don't want to go wild with the dark colours. So I think I'm going to stamp in Crumb Cake, and I'm going to combine my thinking about the ink colour with thinking about whether I want to use the ink straight from the ink pad or whether I want to stamp off once or twice first. So that's called generational stamping. Let me find a bit of card. There we go. So if I stamp straight from the ink pad, this is Crumb Cake ink. That's what it looks like. And then if I stamp again without re-inking, you can see it's much paler, and I can stamp again and again and again and again. So that's 6 times with just inking the stamp once. And depending on the effect I want, this generational stamping is really, really useful. So you can see, I know this is on vanilla card, but you can see that that would be quite a contrast straight from the ink pad. So I think what I'm looking for is probably more that kind of strength of colour. So that was stamping off twice. So let's stamp off once, twice, and then on here. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. So that's quite faint. It's there, but it's not in my face. My dragonfly is still the focal point. So let's stamp once and twice off. And most of my stamping is going off the edge of the card. I'm not trying to get the entire image onto the card every time. I just want little hints of it. So that's probably enough of that one. I'm going to add some of this really lovely kind of spattery one as well, and I think I'm going to have that just a little bit more intense. So let's just have a look on here. So that's straight from the ink pad, and that's 2nd generation, and that's 3rd generation. 3rd, I think. So I'll stamp it off once, twice, and then 3rd generation. And again, I'm not stamping it absolutely everywhere. Just little hints and touches of it. You really can't do this wrong. Don't analyse too much. Just have fun with it. So I've got some little spatters up here and down here. So it's very subtle, but it's starting to get some depth to it. So now I'm going to come and do the edges with a little bit of tearing and distressing. We used to do a lovely distressing tool that unfortunately has disappeared from the catalogue. So if you've got one of those from way back when, you can use that. But if you haven't, you can use your scissors. Now be careful, obviously, you don't want to cut your fingers. But what I'm essentially going to do is scrape the blade of my scissors along the edge of the card. I'll try and do it slowly, so you can see what I'm doing. So that gives me that lovely kind of frayed edge. Sometimes it'll catch and tear a little bit. That's absolutely fine like that. I don't mind that at all. Sometimes I do it deliberately. So just go all around the edges. Now you can of course tear your card instead of cutting it, which will give you a different looking effect, but that's also interesting. I talked about tearing card ages ago. I'll show you in a sec that there you can tear card in 2 different ways depending on the kind of edge you want. So I've gone all the way around this card, and I don't know if you can see my desk. Don't do this with an open ink pad, because all these fluffy bits that I've just scraped off will end up in my ink pad. Ask me how I know. Andriana's here. Hi there. Nice to have you join us. Okay, and give this a really good brush to get all those little tiny fluffy bits off. So talking about tearing card, if I tear the bit I've got hold of towards me, I get that kind of frayed edge. And if I tear the piece away from me, I get a different edge, and That's something that you can exploit when you're doing vintage style, because it will take up ink very differently. Where you've got these frayed fibres, you'll find that it will take up the ink a lot more. So if I bring in some soft suede ink and a bit of sponge and sponge that torn edge, this is the one that I tore towards me. Hopefully you can see that that has really taken up a lot of ink there on those frayed fibres. If I do the other side, it looks very different. Let me find a piece of pale card to lay it on top of, just so you can see the difference. There we go. So I know we've got that stamping here I did, but this is the one where I tore towards me. That's the one I tore away from me. So I could have torn the edges on this, but I haven't. I've scraped them instead, just to give you a different idea. And here the fibres have been really scuffed and frayed, so they will absorb more ink and give me a really nice edge. I'm going to exploit that little tear there a bit more, and I might add some more tearing. I've got another one up here, so let's just tear that. There we go. And then I think I've buried it on my desk. I've got a cocktail stick here somewhere, not because I'm going to have an exciting mixed drink, but because I'm just going to curl my paper around. No, that's gone. Let me reach for another one. There we go. So I just find it easier to kind of curl around a cocktail stick. You can use a skewer if you've got a skewer, but these give you quite nice tight little curls, so you end up with something like this. So I'm just playing, really. I've got no particular plan. I'm just doing a variety of different techniques that will help to add interest to the card and just make it look a little bit old, like it's been hanging around on a shelf or a drawer for a while. Okay, so I've done a little bit of distressing, physical distressing to the card, and I'm now going to come back with some ink and go round the edges. So my stamping on here had all been in Crumb Cake. I'm now bringing in soft suede, which is a little bit darker, and I've got it on a sponge wedge because I really prefer a sponge wedge if I'm going to be inking the edge of card. And I always hold it like this. I've got the card flat, and I'm going to move that sponge wedge vertically at right angles to the edge of the card, and that will give me a really nice inked edge, but it won't give me kind of blobby shapes along there. If I was to just dab it on there, I get kind of blobs, but if I go like that, I get a nice inked edge. And then when I get to these bits I've torn, I make sure there's some ink on the back as well as the front, and it's lovely. Can you see how the ink is taken up by those creases and folds? I really love that. And then that will come back on itself. You can see this is not a clean a clean kind of crafting. If you can't stand having inky fingers, then pop yourself some vinyl gloves on. That will work. It doesn't bother me remotely. Everybody knows what I do. As far as I'm concerned, it's a sign of an afternoon well spent if at the end of it I've got really inky fingers. But if it bothers you, you can certainly wear vinyl gloves, and then your hands won't be too bad. There we go. So where I cut these fibres with my scissors, they're all taking up much more ink. You can see how dark that edging is there. so I've gone all the way around that now. So it's starting to look a lot more kind of vintagey, isn't it? Much more so. I'm just going to, what have I done with that cocktail stick? They're so tiny they just disappear on a desk. I'm just going to roll these a little bit more. There we go, that's better, like that better. All right, so that needs something else. It needs to be darker around here, for my taste anyway. And I am also going to add some spatters in a minute, but I'm going to add just a little bit more spongy, or brushing I should say, rather than sponging, but a bit more ink anyway. So I'm going to bring the soft suede back on my blending brush, a bit more ink, and just darken those edges a bit. I don't want to completely hide all my stamping, but I do want to just add a little bit more depth to the edges, but it's nearly there. So you can see making a vintage style card is really just about building up layers, layers of stamping, layers of inking, layers of distressing. And I'm not doing anything highly technical. What I'm doing now is probably the most technical thing, and if you've had a go with the blending brushes, you'll know that actually it's not very technical at all, because the brushes do all the work for you. A little bit of practice and people are finding that they work really, really well for them. All right, and then I'm just going to bring back this spatter stamp, and I'm going to bring back the soft suede and just stamp off once, and then just add a few more darker speckles with my light. Again, I'm not really thinking too much about where I put these. I'm stamping off the edge of the card quite a lot so that I end up with just patchy bits of the image. I'm not stamping carefully and giving myself almost a kind of a spotty appearance. I'm just going to hold that at arm's length, which doesn't help you, but just helps me to see it a little bit better. Okay, I really think that is very nearly there. I'm just going to do a little bit of ink spattering, and then I think that will be done. All right, so I'm bringing in a clear block. I'm going to press it on my ink pad. If you prefer, you can close your ink pad, squeeze the lid and the base towards each other, and that will press ink onto the inside of the lid, and you can use that as a palette as well. It doesn't matter which you do, but I've just got some ink on here. I could even have put a drop or two from a re-inker bottle. I've got a water painter. I'm going to squeeze out a couple of drops of water and then just mix that with the ink. So I've now got really watery ink on here. Another couple of drops, there we are, because what I want to do is I want it to spatter when I move it. So at this point you want to move out of the way anything that's on your desk that matters, because you can guarantee that it will hit everything you've got. And I'm just going to tap this. And that's just adding a little bit more, less regular spattering to my image. If any goes somewhere and I think, oh no, I didn't want it there, I can just dab it and it will come off easily and quickly. I think I want probably a little bit more, actually, a little bit more that's a bit darker. So I'm just going to wipe my block off, add some more ink to it, and be a little bit less enthusiastic with the water this time. There we go. So I still want it thin enough to spatter, but I want more colour in it so it's darker. There we go. That's better. There we are. And as expected, I've got spattered brown ink all over my desk. And then finally, I am going to bring back the espresso ink and just really darken up the edges a little bit more. I could do this with a sponge wedge, just like I showed you before, but I think I'm just going to bring in my brush and just add some more depth at the edges. Did I say sponge brush? I don't know if I did or not. You know, you sometimes wonder, what did you just say? There we go. Okay. I've smudged some of my droplets. Those will actually dry into nice little neat round droplets. And can you see my hands? So I'm just going to quickly wipe those off before I do anything else. There we go. So the card is pretty much finished. I'm not going to actually glue the layers together because I do want to let all that ink and water dry. But let me just remind you what I did. So I stamped my image first of all. Then I used the brush to add some colour that was actually, in this case, the same colour as my base card, which was Crumb Cake, all the way around. And I left the area around my image without really any ink on it. And then I added some ink in a slightly darker shade, also with the blending brush, further out to the edges of the card, so it was getting darker as it got towards the edges of the card. I added some stamping with some sort of texture images. I used these two. Anything with little dots on it, or any kind of, you know, non-picture image, you'll find that there are all sorts of them that you can use, and I'll show you the ones I used on the pink card in a minute. Some of them are quite surprising, I think. So I added a little bit of stamping, and I thought about generational stamping, so I inked the stamp and then stamped it off on scrap paper once or twice before I stamped on here, just to vary the amount of ink and also not have it too heavy or dark. After I'd done that, I ran my scissors all the way around the edges of the card to kind of fray it, and I tore a few pieces and then rolled them round a cocktail stick just to make them curl more easily. And then I used a bit of sponge wedge to darken the edges of the card, and I used the darker soft suede, and then I've also used that around the edges with the blending brush, and I used some Early Espresso on the very edges as well. And I've looked at it and thought, does it need any more? I added a little bit more stamping in a slightly darker colour ink, and then I mixed up some ink on a block and spattered it across there as well for some more spatters that were a bit less regular than the stamp. And then I think all I need to do is just stamp some words on there, and then that is ready to go onto a card base. So I'll keep my words fairly central so that they're on that lighter part. I could obviously put them on a banner or anything else. There we are. You are an inspiration. And then it'll go on my card base. You can see straight away those two pieces of card were the same colour when I started. So the inking really does make quite a difference. I'm going to add some inking to the edge of this card just so that it's not quite such a stark contrast. So I've got soft suede ink here. I've got my same blending brush I've been using throughout. I just make sure before I put it on a lighter colour that I've rubbed off all the ink on the desk. And I'll just come around the edges first of all with the brush, and then I'll probably sponge the edges as well. I don't have to worry about the middle because that's going to be completely hidden by that piece I've just made. Bit more ink. So that's really knocking back the paleness of that card and just making it less of a stark contrast with the piece that I've stamped. So if I lay that on there, that's better, but it just needs some edging, which I think I'm going to do in Early Espresso. So I've got a piece of sponge. I'll open up the card and I'm just going to edge the front just to give a narrow, darker border. Now I could go all out, I could get my scissors on this and I could distress the edge of the card base as well if I wanted to. I could do the same on a piece of card for the insert. So it just depends, you know, how vintage do you want to go there. So that now looks much more in keeping to me. I've got some champagne rhinestones which I will add when I finish it. Oops. Let's just lay those there for the minute. It's still damp from all the ink I've put on it, so I'm not going to stick them on yet. I thought I would, but I think they're going to peel off, so I'll wait until it's properly dry. So I'll scatter those around. But what I will do is decorate the envelope. Oops, that's one I prepared earlier. Oh, I thought I got a blank one here. Never mind, let's bring this in. So, no, let's find a blank one. Bear with, bear with. There we go. I've stamped on all my envelopes. This is a new one. Okay. Right, so let me find that dragonfly stamp first of all. And stamp on the envelope. And then I'm going to do just some of what I did to the card on the envelope, just so it all ties in nicely together. So I'll bring in my blending brush. There's probably some ink left on here. So I'm just going to blend the edges, yes there is, the edges of the envelope. Just kind of in a curve across that corner. So it's just very subtle. And I've got the Crumb Cake ink pad here. And I've got this little kind of dotty stamp. I'm just going to add some third generation. So I've stamped off once, twice. So the third time is when I stamp on here. And 1, 2, 3. I've stamped off 3 times with this grid pattern. So the fourth generation is going on the envelope. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So just some little touches of that, and I think I want just a little bit more ink on there now, just to blend that stamping in just a little bit more. So there we are. Got a vintaged envelope as well. So that's the card you've just watched me make. It just needs assembling. And here's one I made earlier. I've added an extra layer on this one. I'm going to give my fingers another wipe because I've just covered myself in ink again, having carefully wiped them. And then I'm going to bring back that pink card and just talk you through what I did on that one. Okay, so here's the pink card. Let's just move those rhinestones so they're not too distracting. Okay, so I started off with Very Vanilla card and I stamped this image in Merry Merlot, and then I used a blending brush, a different one that I use for pinks, to blend Blushing Bride ink over the vanilla card, just leaving the figure without really any ink on it at all. So I covered the rest of it so it was all very pale pink. And then I used the blending brush with Rococo Rose ink to go around the edges a little bit further out. So this has got no ink, this has got Blushing Bride, and then the edges have got Blushing Bride overlaid with Rococo Rose. Then I did some extra stamping on there, and let me pull out the stamps I used for this one. Where are we? Okay, so that's my image there from Beautiful Moments, which is just gorgeous. And then I've stamped these really pretty leaves. These are from Very Versailles. It's this leaf stem which is just so useful. I use that a lot. So I've repeat stamped that on here. And then you can see some lines of sort of script here, which is this stamp again from Versailles. So I've stamped that here and then a little bit there. Most of it is off the edge, just a hint there. And again, I use generational stamping for both of these. So I've stamped off, I think, twice before I stamped on the card. And this ink is Rococo Rose. So again, it's that brownish pink colour. I used this little, I think of it as lavender, it could be grasses I suppose, but this little stamp here anyway, just to add a little bit of extra foliage and flowers around my focal point here. I stamped some of them in Merlot, stamped off once, and then I stamped quite a lot of them in Rococo Rose. Again, stamping off once or twice to reduce the ink, so as it gets towards the edge of the card it gets paler and paler. And then I used Waterfront, which is a much loved set of mine. I used this dotty image here and stamped the dots not all the way around the edge, but mostly around the edges, most of the edge. And this one here I stamped really all the way round, but in a very irregular way. So sometimes I had a lot of the image onto the card, sometimes I had not very much of it on, and it's also not a regular shape, it's much wider here than it is over here, for instance. So that gave me some darker edging. So I did quite a lot of stamping on this. Then I distressed the edges with my scissors as I had done before, and then I inked the edges with Rococo Rose and a sponge. I layered that on top of a piece of Rococo Rose card, and I distressed and inked the edges on that layer as well. And then my card base, I don't know if you're going to be able to see, I'll lift it right up. Let's go that way. There we are. I have to wait. I don't know if you can see on my iPad or not. You might be able to. So on the card base, which is also Rococo Rose, I have done some stamping in Rococo Rose ink. So I've stamped these leaves, and I've stamped the dot stamp at the top and the sides, and then at the bottom I stamped the little individual lavender plant stamp. So there is quite a lot of stamping on the card base, and then I inked the edges as well. So it's very subtle. I just build this up in layers one after another and adding until I think there's enough there. You can't really do this wrong. Just bear in mind the different techniques. There's inking, there's tearing, you can curl things if you want to, you can sponge on ink or brush on ink, you can spatter them with ink. Don't go too wild to start with. Have quite pale shades of whatever your ink is, because you can always go darker. Light in the centre, work out towards the edges getting darker, and that's it really. Stop when you're happy. So those are my top tips for vintage cards. Let's bring in the two again, just so that you can see them side by side. These are the finished projects. I'll leave them there for a moment while I just have some more of my tea, which I'm sure is cold by now. I'm not doing very well getting things under the camera today, am I? Hopefully that's better. So if you have any questions on creating vintage style cards, let me know. And I'm going to cover you over again and turn you back up to me and tell you what I'm going to be doing next week. So this time I'm going to remember to take off the settings that would otherwise leave me upside down. I think I've got that right. I think the camera's straight. There we go. So hopefully I'm up the right way, and you can see all of me. I haven't cut myself off too much. Okay, so 2 o'clock next week I'm going to be doing witch glue. So I'm going to run through all the other glues very quickly and tell you what they're all great for. And as far as the crafting is concerned, I'm doing something which I'm calling mini gift to $1 million. So how to dress up something that didn't cost you very much and make it look like it was a lot more. So watch out on this page. Monday or Tuesday I'll set up an event. I'll tell you what I'll be using. So if you want to craft along with me, you can. but that's what I will be doing this time next week. The week after that, I haven't decided yet, but the last Friday in March, which is the 26th, I'm going to be unboxing and making up the Simply Citrus kit. So that's just a reminder, if you were here last week, if you'd like to craft along with me with that, then order yourself the Simply Citrus kit. If you need any details from that, let me know. You can order it in my online shop, or I'm placing an order tomorrow, so if there's anything else you want, let me know before tomorrow morning, and I can add that to my order list for you, whether it's the citrus kit, adhesive sheets, foam adhesive sheets, or indeed anything else. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been really lovely to have you all and to spend time with you. I'll put this video up onto YouTube now, so it will be easy for you to find if you want to refer back to it at any point. I hope you have a great weekend, and thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next Friday. Bye bye.